I'm Dr. Karen Layou, Professor of Geology at Reynolds Community College in Richmond, Virginia. I also am the college's Honors Program Coordinator.
My name is Laura Guertin. I am a professor of earth science at Penn State Brandywine, located right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Laura and I were part of a program called the Urgegeoscience program. Urge stands for Unlearning Racism in Geoscience. The program was an outgrowth of a group of scientists at Woods Hole Institute in Massachusetts who wanted to come together to talk about how to address some of the issues regarding systemic racism in the discipline of geosciences. They went to the National Science Foundation to seek funding to support a program that would bring groups of geoscientists together around the country, working in departments at respective institutions to review interviews and literature, and getting us to really think about how we can do better in terms of making a more equitable and diverse and inclusive environment for Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the geosciences.
And this work is so important for our discipline. The geosciences is one of the least diverse disciplines in all of STEM. And so this is work that people had been working on, but it really was after George Floyd that our discipline became mobilized and said, we really need to do better. And not only do we need to diversify our discipline, but we need to move from being passively not racist to then being actively anti-racist. And that includes in our departments, in our institutions, and in geosciences as a whole. The URGE program is a nationwide program, put out a call for groups of people, approximately 12 people, to come together and form pods. And the pods, most of them were formed around departments. So you had faculty and graduate students and postdocs that would come together to really look at what are the practices and what are the policies that are in place. But the URGE program also encouraged faculty that were outside of departments. So whether they were with nonprofit organizations or even groups of geoscience colleagues from different institutions to come together. For myself, I'm the only geologist at my particular institution at Penn State Brandywine. And when I heard about the URGE program and the opportunity to be able to dive into the literature, to engage in discussions, and to really think and reflect upon what we can do to do better for diversity in the geosciences, I knew this was something I wanted to participate in. However, being a pod of one wasn't going to be very effective. So I actually started asking around and put out announcements on email listservs looking for other geologists that were similar to me, geologists that maybe are the only ones in their discipline or they're a part of very small departments and wanted to come together. And so fortunately, Karen is one of the people that responded to my call, and we did form a pod of 12 individuals across 12 different institutions to come together and to learn, to engage, and to take action.
It's really important for geoscientists to teach at two-year colleges to work with their colleagues across other institutions. Very commonly, geologists teaching at two-year colleges are lone wolves. We are the only ones at our institution, and therefore, being able to participate in something larger is incredibly beneficial for our own professional development. Additionally, two-year colleges are a great entry point for many students into the geosciences. And many two-year colleges serve Black, Indigenous, and students of color. And therefore, we are one of the first places that the students that we are interested in engaging to make the geosciences more diverse come into contact with geoscience. In fact, in my classrooms, I often ask, do you know any geoscientists? And most folks will say no. And then I point to myself and I say, well, here you go. Now you know one. And so we continue on and encourage them to think about careers and looking into becoming part of the geoscience community.
I had the amazing opportunity and privilege to serve as the leader of what we called the 2YC Geopod. Again, primarily because we were faculty that are at community colleges or two-year feeder institutions of larger university systems. And when I had put the call out and we had the responses for 12 people to come together, there were only a couple of people that I knew ahead of time. Most people, such as Karen, I had never met before. And we were entering into a 16-week program where every other week we were going to be coming together in Zoom and discussing topics that some of us had never had an opportunity to discuss with peers before. So for me, it was exciting. It was a little bit of anxiety too, making sure that we were honoring and being respectful, not only to each other, but to the topic, and to making sure that our conversations were moving us forward and that we were all able to feel safe in these discussions and to be able to come up with deliverables, which was also a requirement within the URGE program. Not only to educate ourselves, but how can we make sure we are going to hold ourselves accountable to make the change that we want to see within the discipline?
Laura was a fantastic leader throughout the URGE process. Because we were a group that was a little bit different from other pods, Laura did communicate with the leaders of the URGE program to make sure that what we were proposing to do as part of our deliverables was acceptable and met the goals of the URGE program requirements. Again, coming together in our group, I actually knew quite a few of the folks through other engagement with GO2YC programs across the nation over the last few years. But again, it was great to meet some new folks. And also, again, as Laura mentioned, to share some perspectives on these issues related to diversity, equity, inclusion. At most of our institutions, this has become a new strategic initiative. It has become something that's very important and being discussed at the administrative level. And so being able to discuss these issues with my peers, and then also think about how do we actually implement new ideas? How do we create change? That is important. And having that conversation, having the ability to have this conversation, not just at a one-time workshop, but over the course of several months, was really beneficial to encouraging me to think about what change I'm going to bring to my classrooms and hopefully to Reynolds in the coming weeks, months, and years.
And Karen, if I can add on to that, I think one of the strengths of our pod, even though we were from 12 different institutions, the ability to share what our institutions were doing. Each school is at a different stage in this process. We have different policies in place, or we're at the early stages of discussions, or some of us have already been doing assignments in our classes to promote inclusion and diversity. And so for us to be able to come together and share those resources and share those links, I thought it was amazing. And I think it really advanced us as a group, as a whole. And I really am excited to see what the future impact is going to be, not just for our different institutions, but for the discipline as a whole.
One of the goals of the URGE program was to produce deliverable documents each week based off of the interviews and research articles that we had read, specifically addressing certain aspects of the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that were being discussed that week. Ultimately, then, by the end of the program, a group of pod members would have a document or new policies, procedures, suggestions, recommendations for their departments and institutions to work from to address, again, issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because we are a pod of members from different institutions, that became a bit of a challenge. And so one of the things that we decided early on was that we wanted to create a document that would be beneficial to two-year colleges across the country. So week to week, we used the topics that were assigned, and we went to our individual institutions and looked at our own policies and procedures. In some cases, we had things in place, in others, there was very little. And so as a result, we were able to put together a document that reflects our shared experience and our shared institutional perspectives on these issues. In order to make sure that this document doesn't just stagnate, but actually goes somewhere, we've been working with the National Association of Geoscience Teachers two-year college division. And through that organization, we have been able to get our document posted on their website. Again, this is a group of the larger organization that is specifically for supporting and advancing issues and needs related to two-year college faculty. And so we hope that this document will serve as a starting point for many other institutions and faculty as a place to start to think about how to, again, create that change we would like to see related to diversity, equity, inclusion issues.
And what I really like about our final deliverable too, we compiled over 30 pages of information that is such a valuable resource. And we broke it down into what we can do for students as well as what we can do for faculty and the larger institutions as well. So I'm thrilled that we were able to compile, again, what we do in our own classrooms and what we know are practices that others are doing, from what do you do during the first day of class? What do you include in your syllabus? How do you highlight and profile those that are underrepresented in the field to bring those people front and center to your students? So one unique part about our pod is because our faculty are so dedicated and talented in the classroom, that's where we spend our time. We were able to take that perspective and that experience and bring that to our pod's final deliverable. And I think that really set our pod and separate from what the rest of the pods within the URGE program. Again, there were over 270 pods, over close to 4,000 participants throughout the URGE program. But we were the only ones coming from these two-year environments and really focused a lot on the teaching and helping faculty bring diversity, equity, and inclusion issues into the classroom. And I'm thrilled to see where it goes too. Obvious, as Karen, you mentioned, this is not going to be a static document. This is something we will continue to build upon and share throughout our community.
One of the things I'm most excited about the URGE program providing to me is more advice on how to be intentional about what I'm doing in the classroom. Very often throughout the semester, you're just kind of racing from one class to the next, but taking some time here at the end of the program and over the summer to really incorporate some of the new ideas and perspectives that were introduced through the program are going to be quite useful. In the past, I've used scientist spotlight assignments in my classroom, and through this program, I have been introduced to quite a few more, so I'm excited to use those. I plan to do a little bit more in terms of thinking about land acknowledgements in my assignments. This is something that we talked about specifically with respect to Native American communities and making sure that we talk about their history on our landscapes. Additionally, one of the things that came up in the program is different ways of knowing. And that's a great example of how we can use historical accounts from Native communities or just different perspectives on how we address things like climate change. I also hope to share much of what I have learned in the URGE program with my colleagues across the institution at Reynolds. This is not just geoscience specific information. In fact, many of the papers we read were from students in other disciplines within STEM. So even though we do have our diversity issues within geoscience, the fact is the strategies and ideas that we were discussing are pertinent across disciplines at the two-year college, and not even just within STEM. So the key here is that I want to share this information with my colleagues, and I hope to do so in some of the different ways that we have at Reynolds through some of our faculty research, symposiums, some of our brown bag lunch series that we do, and just casual conversation when we get back to campus.
One of the items I think we could not understate is the importance and the impact and the significance of the URGE program happening. It's really the first time that the geosciences as a community has come together nationwide. And thank goodness for Zoom allowing us this opportunity to be able to do this, where we could come together virtually and have these discussions. And especially for our 2IC URGE pod, that we are all from different all the time zones across the United States coming together in Zoom and discussing these topics. And what's great is that even though the formal program is done, the work of URGE is still continuing. And our pod has already submitted an abstract to a conference where we're going to be able to disseminate and share the deliverables that we have come up with. We also look forward to presenting at future conferences. We have some short newsletter articles and other papers that we want to work on. We are still connecting as a pod, which is wonderful because the work is not going to be done. Again, even though the URGE program formally has ended, there are issues that still need to be addressed, work that still needs to be done. And it's always going to be a changing environment. I don't think we can ever say that there's a finish or that we put the period on it and we close the book. This is just a chapter for us that we've started. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with Karen and our other colleagues in the URGE program to see where we go and how we advance these efforts.